Disclaimer. Please note that this episode contains depictions of violence that some people may find disturbing. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the speakers, commenters, experts, and/or hosts. They do not explicitly or necessarily reflect nor represent the channel's policy or the views held by this channel or broadcaster. The broadcaster or its channel cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed during this program.
Hello, folks. This is your host, Drew, and I'm with my beautiful co-host, Katie, and welcome to today's episode of The Night Crew, a podcast all about true crime, mystery, and supernatural phenomena. Now, today we have a pretty crazy case from Morocco. It's called the Morocco murders, and they were about these two women, for a gist, were, trying to be, tour guides, that kind of thing, and they got murdered in a horrendous way. Now, Katie, my co-host, is going to talk about a video that got released on Reddit, which explains a lot of what's going on. So I'll let her take it away.
So first of all, I would not recommend watching this video because it is gory, it is violent, but then again, it shows how terrorists can act towards civilians. So the two victims that were murdered in this case were Louisa Jespersen and Marina Ueland. So Louisa was 24, Ueland was 28 years old. And basically in this video, it's three of the defendants are there. One of them is holding the camera. The other one's holding a machete. The other one's just standing by helping to kill Louisa. Louisa is shown in the video. They start at the back of the neck. That isn't working. They flip her over. They decapitate her, the front end. And I mean, the audio is horrible. I'm not going to go too much into detail about that, but I also made Drew watch it and he had some opinions about that as well.
Well, the thing is, I've served overseas. I've seen some crazy, crazy stuff. And the thing is with this is it's, you know how you see gore in TV shows, movies, that kind of thing. Well, when you see it in real life, it's a completely different story. You're like, oh my gosh, this is actually pretty crazy. There's a lot of blood coming out of them, etc. Right? So for me to see that, and I was like, I can't watch that for more than 20, 30 seconds. It was pretty bad. And in the video, Louisa is actually crying for her mother in her own language, and that really, I was like, dang, man, it's really sad. It's really, really sad.
Yeah, essentially, after they took the video, they left their tent, went into town, hid for a while, and they sent that video to the Islamic State because they wanted to be part of the group ISIS. And ISIS wanted no part of these murders. They did not claim it at all. And essentially, somehow, the video went viral. The victims' parents received copies of it. The government received copies of it. It got so bad at some point that they had to incarcerate some people that kept sharing the video because it was so gory and violent, and they didn't want Morocco's face to be a face of disaster.
Well, so what we're going to do is we're going to take you guys back from day one of their story and how it led up to the cases and what actually resulted from those cases. So we're going to hit, the background, the murder, and then the trials and the hearings for these. So basically, these two women, they were attending the University of Southeastern Norway. They were training to be guides. Now, they studied outdoor leadership, eco-philosophy, and, cultures, right? I mean, if you're going to be guides, you have to learn cultures about the places that you're going to, okay? So it's alleged that these two women began their hike in Lemel village, okay? And they departed from Oslo on December 8th, 2018, and arrived in Morocco on December 9th, on a month-long, mind you, this is a month-long excursion. It's believed that they began their hike in Ilmil before setting out to the highest peak in the Atlas Mountains, Mount Tubaki. Before they arrived at the village, Jespersen had created a post on Facebook asking for advice about, climbing that mountain. And Jespersen's mother begged her daughter pretty much not to go on the trip. Her mom was like, yeah, we don't want you to go on the trip. We have a bad feeling about this. We think this is wrong. You shouldn't go. But she she chose to go, and she did not listen to her mother at all. But she said, her mother said that she prioritized safety and was confident to embark, on her adventure. She was excited to go to be a guide, and they were found 6.2 miles from the village Emil, okay?
And that village was a popular tourist attraction for Morocco. It's where a lot of people began their hike before they went up into the mountains. And even when with Jespersen's mother, she would text her every single day. And eventually, after 1, 2, 3, 4 days, Jespersen isn't answering. She got worried, and come to find out, she sent this video of her daughter, and that's when chaos erupted.
So our defendants, right? These are the people who did the crime, and they're definitely going to be doing the time, I guess you could say. But we have 4 defendants here who are the main ones. Now, from what I understand, there's 22 people, but they only caught 4, and they are pretty much making these 4 pay for everything that they did. So we have our first one is Abed, our second one EJ, our third one Younes, and our fourth one Rashad. Now, these are just what would you say, like nicknames for these people? Because with their culture, their names are a lot different than ours. So it's hard for us to completely say their name without messing it up. So we just gave them nicknames pretty much. Now, Abed was the ringleader of this group, right? He was the guy that was probably in one of the videos. Now, we don't know which guy it was. He may be recording or the one hitting the lady with a machete. Now, he actually flat out admitted to killing one of them. He didn't say which, but he confessed to killing one of them. Now, Younes, which was the other guy, confessed to the other murder. So, Abed killed one, and then Younes killed one. Now, they don't know who they killed. They wouldn't admit to that. But they both said they killed someone. Now, Rashad took a video of the murders on his phone. That's the one you see on Reddit. Like we were talking about earlier, we don't want you to go and look at that. It's really gory, really messed up, but if you really want to see it, it's on Reddit.
And before they even conducted this murder, obviously they had a lot of pride in their religion, so a few days before they conducted this murder, they pledged allegiance to the Islamic State in a room with a makeshift flag that they made out of a t-shirt, and basically they pledged allegiance to it, and they figured if we conduct this murder, then we can be a part of the Islamic State. Obviously, that did not happen. The Islamic State was like, why did you kill innocent women? They weren't wearing clothes in the video. There was just a lot of stuff wrong with it. And essentially, it took the defendants 4 days to identify their targets to figure out who they could kill. And the other potential victims were with guides. But our victims did not have guides. They were alone.
Yeah, so for them to go out by themselves in a country they're not used to or don't really know anything about and try to be guides and go and adventure and do all this kind of stuff, right? It looks real bad. But for these men to plot for 4 days how they're going to steal these women, how they're going to kill them, is definitely, it's creepy. I couldn't imagine, staying at where you're staying and have someone randomly watching you without you knowing for 4 days. 4 days. That is insane to me.
And considering the defendant's background, I mean, they came from a poor background, poorly educated. They really took pride in their religion, and they just really, their whole goal was to impress the Islamic State. That's all they wanted to do. They thought if they murdered these defenseless women, then their video would be displayed by the terrorist group, but it wasn't displayed. They didn't acknowledge that attack.
Yeah, so ISIS was actually, they were the ones who were like, yeah, you guys need to do this to join us, and they wanted it recorded. That's why, you found the video on Reddit, etc., right? But ISIS, they're pretty bad. They're not the best people, I guess you could say. Obviously, they're a terrorist group. They're pieces of crap. But they thought ISIS thought and told these gentlemen, if you kill these women and you send us a video of it, we will let you join our terrorist group. Well, the thing is, since that video got leaked, ISIS was like, yeah, that wasn't us. And to me, that's insane. Like, I don't know, man. But the Islamic State didn't claim responsibility, and ISIS was like, that wasn't us. Because they didn't want to touch Morocco. But EJ was one of the guys who was there. He previously served a prison sentence in Morocco, which is ironic enough, for trying to join ISIS in Syria. And he was released in 2015.
Yeah, so I mean, they have that poor background, criminal background. These are murders. They didn't care what happened to them.
Yeah, it's just, for you to steal 2 women, like, and it goes back to the video. If you, like I said, we don't recommend you watching the video, but if you go back to the video, you could see how, like, I don't want to say angry, but like how violent these men are. And,
yeah.
And like I said, I served overseas. We dealt with some of that violence, but to see that in person, I mean, given it's through a recording, but it's still pretty bad, and it's not something that's you don't look upon lightly, I guess.
Well, I mean, not only did they decapitate both of them, there were still 23 other injuries on Louisa's body and 7 more on Ueland's body. So, I mean, they essentially went in their tent, attacked them, decapitated them, left, fled, took them a few days to find them by authorities, then they went to jail.
So they definitely tortured these women before they killed them. And obviously, everybody can guess what they did to these women sexually, right? It happened. We're not going to say it, through our podcast, but you can tell it happened. But to find 23 injuries on Louisiana's body and 7 on Maren's is crazy. That's insane. But the trial, so that we'll move on to the trial, okay? The trial lasted 11 weeks. 11 weeks, okay? And 21 other men were accused of having involvement with these murders. And obviously they're going to deny it, right? The prison time for these 4 men ranged from 15 years to life. The court ordered the 3 main men that did it. So it's going to be Abed, EJ, and Rashad. And they made them pay $173,696 to Maren's parents.
And that's in U.S. currency,
yeah.
Obviously.
So you can tell that's going to be something that they can't just pull out of their pockets and give to them. You know what I mean? That's really bad.
Well, and the crazy thing is that Morocco hasn't used the death penalty sentence since 1993 until this case. They were a simple country. I mean, most of their income came from tourists, but now that's not the case. I mean, after this murder happened, they had so many police officers guard the mountains and the trails and everything else. So they had people guarding the trails?
Yeah, because I mean, that's really, so they were protecting the guys then.
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
Man, that is to have police forces go up into the woods and protect trails where people hike and walk.
Well, it's because they haven't had anything violent like this. Because I tried looking up if they had a murder rate in Morocco or anything. The only thing I could find was about a natural disaster that killed 2,000 people. That was really the most.
So it seems a pretty safe country then, I imagine.
It was, but due to this case, obviously their tourism decreased.
Well, I bet it was. And the thing is, like, do you think these 4 men knew Morocco was a safer country and it'd be easier to take women? That's my question.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they were looking for anyone vulnerable enough to murder and kill.
Wow, man.
And that's why they were looking for people without guides that were solo, so no one would be out looking for them or anything.
Man, that is insane. Well, to continue on with the trial, in February 2023, which was just last year, Abed, he was 36 years old, committed suicide in prison. He was one of the 4 men convicted in the murder of the 2 women. However, he had left before the 2 women were murdered. He was convicted of aiding the men to flee the crime scene. Also, he appeared in the video with 3 other men pledging allegiance to the Islamic State group, pretty much ISIS, right? Now, Abed was first sentenced to life in prison. However, this is the funny part, is he went against it and he fought it, and then the judge was like, nah. So they made a decision, and his life in prison was switched to execution after he appealed his case. So death penalty is legal in Morocco. Obviously, they haven't used it for years.
Yeah, and I wasn't able to find out if they've been executed in prison or not. I could not find anything about the prison sentence or if they're being treated differently than anyone else. I couldn't find much about that. But either way, these murders happen and it affect Morocco forever. I mean, a lot of people don't want to go there anymore, especially this crisis with Syria.
Yeah, so I was in Iraq, okay, in the past couple years, and it's only getting worse there, man. And I tell you what, I'll tell you a story to explain how dangerous this place is. Okay, my first 2 weeks in country, less than a mile away from where we were staying, there was a shooting, like a drive-by pretty much at this house, but instead of it being a drive-by, they walked in this house, killed this man's entire family right in front of him, and then shot him and then burned the building down. And I remember listening and hearing about that from one of my leadership. And that was 2 weeks. That was 2 weeks in country. 2 weeks. And mind you, the United States Army has been there for years. So you can imagine how often this happens.
I just don't understand how they could use religion to kill people. I mean, usually with ISIS, they're killing bad people, aren't they? Or does it matter?
Well, so they obviously hate the U.S.
Yeah.
Trump bombed the crap out of them. But it's just, if they don't agree, no matter who you are, no matter what religion, they will fight you. They will fight you on it. And that's just how they are. I don't want to say they're animals, but they are animals. All they care about is proving that their way of life is correct, and their culture is correct. If not, they're going to hurt and kill you. Now, we're talking about ISIS here. We're not talking about any certain religion. We're just saying the ISIS groups and the terrorist groups that are overseas, they will want to kill you. For example, if you walked in the street, right? You're American, you have regular clothes on, and that they can see that you're white, okay? They will swoop you up within less than an hour. If you're just walking the road in the middle of Baghdad, Iraq, okay? They will not hesitate to take you. They will not hesitate. They don't care where you're from or what you're doing. They will take you and they will do some bad stuff to you. Now, so this is from the Washington Post. They pretty much go into a little bit more detail than what we told you guys about this case. So these men, Abed, EJ, Younes, and Rashad, they went to the women's tent because they were camping, and they went at night with knives, and they wanted to be heroes for this ISIS terrorist group, right? They attacked both in their sleeping bags. They stabbed them until their bodies went limp, and then severed their heads with a machete. Now, you can imagine that they kept them alive long enough to move them and then cut their head off with a machete. Because,
in the video with Louisa, she is still conscious when they are decapitating her, essentially. Because, like Drew said, she's saying, "Mom," you hear her gurgling, she's trying to get away from them, but the one guy, his videotaping it is putting his foot on her head so she stops moving, essentially.
And mind you, this video that they posted, it went so viral. Like million, even United States, Canada, even all the way up to Africa, Iraq, Afghanistan, they all saw this video. And the Islamic State, it got millions of shares, millions of watches by the Islamic State. You know, the supporters that support them, and it got on the dark web, and then from there it just got crazier and crazier.
But going back to the trial case with the defendants, obviously, some of them said they regretted it, but I know almost all of them said that their God would forgive them and that they were forgiven for the murder that they committed, essentially.
And the crazy thing was, there was an attack, right, in New Zealand. It was a mass shooting that killed 51 people, and this wasn't talked about as much as the Morocco murders, which is insane to think about. Matter of fact, I didn't even remember hearing about a New Zealand shooting at all. I remember hearing about the most recent Russian shooting in the theater, whatever they had going on.
Yes, because that's why I'm so iffy about if they should have shared this video, let people see it. On the one hand, it's educating people, don't travel alone, be careful in other countries, but also ISIS, the Islamic State, they're dangerous, and you need to protect yourself if you are going to another country. On the other hand, I feel horrible for the victims' parents, because millions, probably billions of people are seeing their daughter being decapitated by these horrible men. So I don't know how I feel about all that being shared and if it should be deleted.
Yeah, it's sad. They shouldn't even, I can't say they shouldn't have been recording while they're killing people. They shouldn't have been killing people at all and recording, but that's just really disrespectful, even to that point of murdering someone, right? But there were comments on these two victims' Instagrams, right? Now, these weren't on their specific Instagrams, but it was about pictures that they saw on their Instagrams, right? So, one Islamic State supporter posted on Jespersen, it's like some sort of social media company in the Middle East. They quoted, "It is obvious to point out that the naive of the two deceased, but they are, as all, a product of their upbringing." Which is insane to say, because he's pretty much saying, yeah, they deserve to die because, you know, they were raised that way. He also said, perhaps the eternal struggle against prejudice is unpleasant side effects. Like, that again is still pretty crazy to say. And all this information comes from the Moroccan court records and interviews and stuff like that. We will be posting the links on our YouTube.
Yeah, one more thing I wanted to add that kind of surprised me. During the trial, the 3 main defendants couldn't pay court fees. They could not pay the fees, and one of the victims' parents actually requested that she help them pay the court costs and whatnot. And obviously that was denied, and the victim's parents got compensated regardless from the defendants, but I just was very surprised by that she was willing to offer them money after they murdered her daughter.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Like, that woman is so forgiving and brave to do that, because if it was Katie, right, I promise you I would be in jail. I'm not be offering these men money for what they did to my daughter.
Nope.
Like, that's insane to me. And you have to remember, like, none of these guys were big or famous. I mean, they're famous because of the murders, but they did all this because of ISIS and to join the Islamic State. And for example, right, they wanted to carry out this terrorist attack. It's a terrorist attack, but it's really not, because ISIS and the Islamic State didn't own what happened, right? So these men were doing everything they could to do something like this. They prepared, and 4 days of preparation to do this to people is insane. And now, from all the, reports that we have, these two women were so nice, so kind, and obviously they don't deserve any of that stuff to happen to them. And, for example, more info on Abed, which was the main guy who did these murders. He was one of the guys who said, yeah, I killed one of them. He was a street vendor. And he wanted to travel to different countries, and he wanted specifically travel to Syria to support the Islamic State. But this guy was a street vendor. He spent a year in a Moroccan prison way before this even happened in 2015, where he met a bunch of people who had the same views as him.
They just really wanted to be a part of a group. That's all they wanted. And they thought by killing 2 innocent women, I'm sure that wasn't their plan to kill specifically 2 women.
Well, of course not. But they, they're not from that country. They were pretty much visitors, so they knew who to attack. Not locals, not natives, but people who were visiting. And it turns out Abed was actually the ringleader of the group, right? We established that. But he was the guy who brought 22 extra people to get this done. It was him.
Yeah, to plan it all. Which, a lot of the 22 people that were arrested did not admit to the murder. They're like, I had nothing to do with it. I had no part in it. But, most of them were still sentenced 15 years to life regardless.
Well, the thing is, too, they wanted to do other things before this actually happened. So they wanted to make an explosive device, right? And they threw all these ingredients together or whatever. But it didn't work at all. And they were like, okay, well, let's try something else. So they wanted lethal balm, which is pretty much what you put on your lips. Like, what they wanted to do was like make a chapstick and sell it. And it consisted of rat poison, hand lotion, anti-inflammatory cream. And they would put that on car doors, and just, it's kind of like chapstick, but you wipe it on the car doors, right? And if they touched it, it would go through the skin, and eventually, obviously, you would pass away and die.
Well, it's just like in America, how traffickers are doing that, putting drugs on the handles so women pass out once they touch it and get in their car.
Well, the funny thing was, they actually tried to do it on a rabbit, and it failed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Obviously, rabbits have fur. You're not going to be able to touch the skin unless separate the skin from the fur and then obviously do what you're going to do.
Yeah, but either way, they had another guy that was involved with this case that taught them how to use the weapon, how to use certain devices to talk to each other. So, they had a person on every level helping them out with this. I'm not sure if they were in ISIS.
Well, I imagine it was part of the 22 people that he brought on for his group. Because what they wanted to do, they're like, okay, well, this poison didn't work, the explosive device didn't work, so how about we storm resorts with swords, or plowing through crowds of tourists in cars, attacking popular tourist sites with suicide bombs. They literally practiced shooting at a paintball facility, and ironically enough, they couldn't find any guns. So they practiced their shooting at a paintball range.
Fantastic.
But they're like, we gotta figure out something, to prove to this ISIS and the Islamic State that we're the guys.
Yeah, but if they had such a strong allegiance to ISIS, you would think they would know how to murder people the right way. They have a specific way they murder people. They're fully clothed. It's usually not women, I don't think. It's usually men.
No.
Yeah. And these are almost naked women. Of course, they're going to say, no, we have no fault in that murder.
Well, yeah, because at that point, it goes across country, and then it just gets a whole lot of politics and, all that stuff. Even the trial was messy. It took forever. It took 6 years, I believe. But they kind of realized, like, hey, half that stuff we're thinking about isn't going to work. We need to rethink. So they did a reconnaissance on a village in Lamil, which was the one I was talking about. And funny enough, it's a tourist getaway to the Atlas Range. And the Atlas Range is obviously the mountains. They camped for days watching these 4 women, and they were singing militant hymns and reading about the Islamic terrorist groups. Like they wanted to do this, but they were monitoring stuff that was happening in Syria, where the Islamic State was shrinking, which is, they're like, okay, we need to do something about that. So in August, the group released an audio recording of Baghdadi urging followers beyond Syria to launch a new wave of attacks. And that was the Islamic group saying that. And to quote, it said, "Select your targets and carry out a strike. For a piercing bullet or a deep stab to the intestines or the detonation of an explosive device in your hands is akin to 1,000 operations here with us." The Islamic State released that, pretty much giving them and all their people, hey, go kill these people. Go, be a terrorist group. Mm-hmm. And they thought they were doing the right thing, which is insane to me.
Either way, they did not win in the end, because ISIS said no thank you, and they got the death penalty. So they really messed up.
Yeah, and they're actually, now these men on this trip, right, when they were following the women and stuff, they bought bottles of paint and dye to make the Islamic State flag. And the next day, right after that, they packed a bunch of knives, a tent, cell phones. They rode their motorcycles to the outskirts of Marrakesh, then took a taxi to Lamel, which was where all the visitors were coming from.
Yep,
right?
A popular tourist area.
And that's where Louisa and Maren were staying. Obviously, you can tell from what's going on what's going to happen. The day that they arrived on the mountain, on Friday, they spotted a pair of tourists on bicycles. And you want to guess who those are? It was Louisiana and Maren. Okay. And the funny thing is, they took out their knives to target them, but they stepped back. They hesitated. They're like, okay, should we really do this? Should we not do this? So they're really thinking about their options of what could happen to them.
Well, they're probably thinking, let's do it at night when they're most vulnerable, when they're sleeping. And essentially, once they did that at night, they stabbed them in their sleeping bags and then decapitated them.
But before that, they had 2 instances where they would have still, killed and stabbed somebody, right? So the first one, where a couple hikers were walking with a guide. They didn't see the guide at first, so they whipped out their knives. But then they're like, oh shit, that's a big guide, and there's a couple of them. So they're like, okay, we'll put our knives back and we'll back off.
They're looking for people that don't know the area, or they don't have someone with them that actually knows the area. And that's common in any country you go to. Like you said about Syria or Iraq or even Egypt, if you go there by yourself, someone is bound to kidnap you because it's pretty obvious that you're a tourist. You don't know where you're going.
And you become a target. You have a target on your back when you're a tourist. Right?
Yeah, that's why you need a tour guide or go with a group of people, anything to keep you safe.
For example, right, they also tried targeting a British hiker who was there by himself. But they hesitated for whatever reason. Either they were spooked by the villagers or, they were like, maybe we shouldn't do this, when they realized he was Muslim. Which makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But they woke up the next day and it was a Sunday, and they're like, we gotta create some plans, on this mountain trail, trying to figure out, what traps they can make for these people. They started getting frustrated, right? And one of the gentlemen left his wife behind, who was pregnant with his 3rd child. And he's like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. And he went down the mountain. Mm-hmm. That was one of the guys.
He left
as part
before.
Of the 22 people. Yes.
He's the one that actually committed suicide in prison. He wasn't there for the murder, but he left. He was still convicted of it either way for helping.
Yeah. And you have to remember, okay, so these 2 women are hiking on this mountain, okay? And it's a rugged mountain, you know, has that steep descents, large boulders, those tight turns, that kind of thing where you see in Middle East. A lot of those mountains, it's definitely difficult to go up those mountains without any sort of water or anything like that.
Yeah, but this wasn't that new to the two victims. I believe I saw something about one of the victims went to Iceland the year before. They love to travel. They love to go hiking. They're trying to become guides. They actually did a few guides for a group of people. Either way, I mean, it's sad because their parents said they took all the precautions they needed to take for this hike. They felt safe going there. And that wasn't the reality, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they go to get deeper with, you know, how they first saw them, that kind of thing. So what actually happened was EJ and the other four gentlemen, okay, they were the ones who encountered these two women on their hike, right? And apparently none of them spoke to each other, just passed right by each other. Not a word was spoken.
Yeah.
So obviously the gentleman was like, okay, they one of them pretty much followed them all the way until they put their tent up, where the women put their tent up, and then ran down back to the other guys, was like, hey, this is where they are, they're unarmed, blah, 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 and that's where all that stuff took place. So to get into details of the actual murder and stuff like that, the men apparently stabbed through the tent's nylon fabric, and one of the ladies actually broke out of the tent and tried to run, but she got stabbed 3 times. 3 times in her escape attempt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the guy, EJ, he was aiming the camera pinned at one of the women's head, who was on the ground, and his foot was on top of her face. And EJ gave the phone to somebody else, grabbed a knife or a machete, and continued to cut the back of her neck. And it wasn't working. It wasn't working at all. I don't know if their blade was dull or whatever it was. It failed, so they whipped her over, turned her around. They slowly cut her neck. And she bled out. And it's... after all of that happened, they fled downhill towards the tourist place called the Mill.
And they took Ueland's head as well.
Yeah,
which is horrible.
It's terrible.
I don't know why you would want that, but
I don't know. Yeah, why would you bring a head? Oh man, I never understand it.
It's proof, but the video is proof too. That's just stupid.
So on their way down, they found a stream, right? And what they wanted to do was wash their clothes, wash their hands, shave their beards, so they didn't look like anyone that saw them earlier that day. They once they got back to the Mill, they sent the video via telegram to the Islamic State and ISIS. And then from there it went viral, and then obviously they went to court and all that stuff happened. So it's definitely a murder that is very, very hard for people. It's very difficult for people who've never been overseas to really understand how terrible it is.
Yeah, and I mean, the only reason I heard about this case was through TikTok. It's not a known case. It is very gory. It happened in 2018. But I think it's a good case to warn people you're not safe when you travel out of country, even in America. But you just have to be safe. Always travel with someone. Because these terrorist groups, they don't care about Americans. They really don't. They'll do whatever they need to do to get their point across.
And not just Americans, it's, you know, different religions.
And non-believers. Yeah.
Even your skin color. But it's insane, just an insane and sad case. Now, if you guys ever go overseas or to any place where you believe it's going to be scary or dangerous, please, please, please understand their culture, the way that they do things there.
Get a tour guide.
Definitely 100% get a tour guide, because tour guides will save your life. And if they had a tour guide, it would have saved their life.
Especially if they're with a big group too.
Yeah.
They're not going to target you if you're with a big group, or if you're with even a friend that knows the area. They know what they're doing, know where they're going.
Right.
But if you guys have any comments or questions about this case, obviously let us know.
And we hope you enjoyed today's episode. We will see you next week. So, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at The Night Crew. That is capital T, and then H-E, capital N-I-T-E, capital K-R-E-W. That is The Night Crew. Thank you guys. We really appreciate all of your help and all of your support. And we will see you next week. Thank you and have a good day.